Hello and welcome to a Sunday sermon here on Hughes of the World. I hope you're all right this morning. We've got Martin Harrow in the chat. We've got Diz. We've got Sarah Davis. We've got Martin Harrow again. we got Diz again. We've got me mum. Hello, mum. We've got Harry Flashman in there. Hello, everyone. If you'd like to join our friends in the chat, just hit the subscribe button. Wait for approximately 1 minute, and you'll be able to join in with everybody else. So obviously changing things around a little bit, ready for my Guinness World Record attempt, which starts tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Hopefully it'll go right through until, oh God knows, Wednesday at 9 o'clock. I don't know. I'll be talking about every single country in the world in alphabetical order. I've got my Lonely Planet to help me. I've also got this Lonely Planet here, which has got them all listed, including a bunch of territories. I've actually been to over 220 countries and territories. I think it might be more than that, actually. So I'm well placed to talk about a lot of these places. And hopefully 15 minutes per place will give us actually way more than 48 hours worth of content. So yeah, I'll try and be as entertaining as possible. Obviously, I've got to show that it's live. So where these books are at the moment, they're going to be replaced with a TV, and it's going to have whatever's on BBC News, which is going to be on the BBC News channel behind me, and then occasionally I'll pick up a Rubik's Cube to just show that that's not being keyed in somehow by the force of magic. The main thing is that I'll be chatting with you during the whole thing, so if you tune in for a little bit, don't feel like you've got to stay for the whole marathon, but if you want to add things to the comments, obviously I can interact with that, and that kind of proves that it is live, and that I haven't set it up in the past and then just keyed in the TV and I set my clock. So there you go. It's only 18 degrees here in sunny Durham. Everyone else is like sweltering. They're like, oh my God, it's so hot. But yeah, hopefully things will heat up as the show goes on. But I am wearing it. I'm not wearing my hoodie today. I'm not wearing my hoodie, which is very, very exciting. But yeah, you can see that. See the 18 there. That's the temperature at the end. That's 18 degrees. So yeah, there'll be a TV there. Hopefully, if it gets delivered, it's supposed to get delivered today. But I'm getting a new sideboard here, which will come up to the height of this clock. So I'll be able to put all my stuff on there, which should be quite cool. But there you go. And the reason why I've got so many Lonely Planets, by the way, is not just because I've been to all these places. It's also because I used to work for Lonely Planet, and I got loads of free Lonely Planets off them. Thank you, Lonely Planet. In fact, at the moment here, with this stack, right? With this fat stack, there's only. Well, you see, the thing is, first of all, I need a Mexico one, which should be arriving today. I'm gonna buy like a second-hand Mexico one for like $250. But I could argue, it could be argued that my battered old Africa Lonely Planet there, which you can probably just about make out, is split in two because I ripped it in half when I was, because it's split into sections of like North Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa. So I didn't need like to be carrying that huge book around. So halfway through traveling through Africa, I could rip it in two and just keep Southern Africa and East Africa, which is the only place I was going to. But yeah, it won't have that edition doesn't have South Sudan in it. Yeah, so I got a new one because it does have South Sudan in it. So just cover every single country in the world. But actually, having said that, it does get mentioned in there as like somewhere like, don't go there, there's a war. But it is mentioned. It's just not a country in its own right. But it is now. So and hopefully next year Bougainville becomes a country in its own right. Off the coast of Papua New Guinea. I'll hopefully be traveling down there over the summer of 2027. Hope you can join me on that quest. If it happens, because I'm hearing some rumbles that it might not actually happen next year. So, you know. Anyway, that's housekeeping out of the way. Welcome. Oh, I'm going to be making some changes to the Hughes of the World channel. It's going to be split into sections now. Graham Hughes Politics, Graham Hughes Presents. It's going to be stuff that I've made, stuff that I've directed, music videos, short films, that kind of thing. Then there's going to be Graham Hughes travels, obviously. A lot of my travel stuff in there. We're going to have Graham Hughes Speaks, which is going to be my interviews when I got interviewed on TV or did a talk in front of people, you know, for the TED Talk or whatever, you know, the Scout Jamboree. So hopefully there's a lot of work. I've got over 800 videos to sort through and put into the right playlists and to make it all work. But hopefully, now that I've changed the channel to Hughes the World, so it's just my shit. I can bring together some things that I had on different channels. It didn't quite work, so I'm gonna bring it all here, bring it all into one place. So you don't have to just hear me wanging on about politics all the time. You can see me having a great time traveling the world and going, yay, the world's not so bad. So you got the politics ones where I'm like, everything's fucked. Sorry, Mum. And then I'll have the other ones, which is kind of cool. Anyway, right, if you want to just skip that bit that I just talked about and just skip to 6 minutes in, we will be able to talk about Putin. Talk about Putin on the way out, by the looks of things. This is fascinating. Putin is no longer looking as strong as he used to. And when you are a strongman dictator, that comes with a penalty. Do you know what I mean? That comes with a penalty, a huge penalty. You look at dictators throughout history, the leaders who have taken their countries into unwinnable wars, or wars that they could not win. Who have we got? Napoleon Bonaparte, Kaiser Wilhelm II, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Tojo from Japan. We've got Leopoldo Galtieri, who was the guy who started the Falklands invasion. Saddam Hussein, we know what happened to him. Slobodan Milosevic, we know what happened to him. And Francisco Solano Lopez. Also Mengistu Haile Mariam, who's Lopez was the leader of Paraguay, who launched a war against all of his neighbors and ended up fucking dying and losing loads of territory to his neighbors. And Mengistu Haile Mariam, he was in Somalia, warlord, ended up fucking starting a war. Didn't end well for him. And you can add Vladimir Putin to that list of people who have started wars that they couldn't win. He thought he could. He thought, I'm sorted here, no problem here. But when you build your entire political identity around stability, strength, and inevitability, if things don't go your way in terms of a conflict, then you're toast. Since 1999, Russia has made a deal with the devil, the devil being Putin. I may be authoritarian, but I'll keep Russia stable. The bargain was no democracy, no real opposition, massive corruption, but Russians were prepared to offer that up to the Leviathan, offer that up in return for relative stability and national prestige. And that social contract is now well and truly breaking down. The war in Ukraine was supposed to be quick, glorious, and decisive. Kyiv was expected to fall within days. Don't forget, this was a 3-day special military objective, or whatever they called it. And Russian state TV openly discussed installing a puppet government. Instead, Ukraine survived. NATO expanded to Russia's borders in a way that had never happened before, with both Sweden and Finland joining NATO. Russia has lost an enormous amount of manpower and equipment. Sanctions have reshaped the Russian economy, and Moscow itself, the capital of Russia, is now vulnerable to attack. Putin now looks less like a master strategist and more like a gambler, a gangster gambler, a gambler who's sunk cost fallacy, doubling down on his bad bets. And every escalation now causes more problems. Every victory costs more than the last. And the Kremlin increasingly looks like a bunker regime that has been cut off from reality. You're seeing, you remember Comical Ali from the war in Iraq, the second invasion of Iraq. You remember that. That's what Russian state TV is looking like at the moment. Richard, that is so kind of you. Richard has sent 5 Hughes the World gift memberships. Thank you so much. We now have 5 new members of the channel. Oh, that is really, really, really kind of you. And you thank you. You're the best. You're the best. Thank you, Richard. So John Mack, Grado, Waderwick. Oh, I love that. What a great name. Waderwick. Release Waderwick. DJ Marcy Moo and Peter McPeatface, great names, have all been gifted for a membership to this channel for a month, which is really cool, which means you get a little rose after your name. And also you get a little Hughes of the World logo after your name, but also you get to spam the chat, and you should get your name on the credits at the end, which I need to make a note of that. Hang on. I'm going to get my phone out my pocket because I want to make an actual note of this because I keep forgetting to do it. Under have a shave, I need to do credits, so I'll get that done before the end of play today. Hello, says Gallifreyan Ren. Hello, Gallifreyan. What are you eating today? Gallifreyan Ren? You tell us. Shinzed, it must be infuriating for Putin. He kicked off the war thinking he'd just punk Ukraine. Then he discovered his generals had scribbled away the silverware. That's so true. It's so true. Oh, Christ. Oh! Breaking stuff on my desk here. That's pretty much exactly how it went down. And there were massive strikes on Ukraine overnight. Massive civilian targets hit, residential buildings damaged. 4 people have been killed last night. Strikes on civilian targets. Absolute war crime, from the top to the bottom. No doubt about it. And this is not precision warfare. This is just terror bombing. And we're seeing the use of it's called the Resnik hypersonic missile. It's being used against civilians. Putin wants spectacle. He wants fear. He wants Russians to believe that this escalation will give him leverage, and he wants Ukrainians exhausted psychologically. But the problem is for him, right? He's got many problems, but his biggest problem is Ukrainians don't want to be Russian. They want to have their own country. And when you try and take something away from people that they've had for many years, that they've enjoyed for many years, that they've, it's part of their identity, they fight back. And one of the mistakes I think that of successive British governments over the years is always making us feel apart from Europe. And that's going on a little bit of a tangent here, but stay with me. Do you know what I mean? We were never made to feel European. We were always kept a little arm's length in the way that we treated the EU and the way we talked about it, which didn't work for any. It didn't work. Ended up causing us to lose really, really badly during the Brexit fraudulendum when we were taken to town by Russian propaganda, and people didn't think they had anything to lose. Because we didn't really feel European. And that was a big mistake. We should have been excited about Europe in a way that we never were. And I've got some criticism for the EU as well for this, because they should have been taking a bigger part in that. The Liverpool Echo Arena should have been called the European Union Arena. It should have had a big circle of stars on its roof. So you see when you're flying in on a plane into Liverpool John Lennon Airport, you see, oh, look, that circle of stars on the roof of that building. Wonder what that is. It's a big EU flag to say thank EU for paying for this, for match funding for this massive arena in Liverpool. Now we've got the Labour Party conference there, and we have pop stars singing, and it's great. But they never bragged enough. They wanted to hide their bushel in the light. No, hide the bushel, hide the light in the lamp in the bushel. I can't remember what the expression is. But yeah, going back to Putin, he can't win. He can never win this war because Ukrainians will always fight back, and you can't take over a territory. As the Americans found out in Afghanistan, they were there for 20 years. And they got kicked out, and the old governments came straight back in. As the Soviets found out in the same place in Afghanistan, they were there for 10 years during the 1980s. Same thing happened. If people do not want you in their territory, they will just fight and fight and fight every day until you are absolutely exhausted and you have to leave. It's as simple as that. Most of these asymmetric warfare situations end with just one side just being exhausted, usually the side of the aggressor being exhausted, whereas the others, no matter how much they're put upon, no matter how many bombs are dropped on them, no matter how many atrocities are leveled against them by the invading power, they'll never give up, because they've got something. They don't want to lose that integral part of their identity, who they are. So yeah, that's going out. So yeah, bye. I love you. So yeah, Putin wants spectacle and fear, and he thinks that he's going to exhaust the Ukrainians. He's not. Putin's logic is if Russia can't win on the battlefield, then they're going to make civilian life unbearable and break the morale of the Ukrainian people and outlast, Western attention spans. But that hasn't happened. No matter what, we're still talking about the war in Ukraine. It's still in the news pretty much every day. No matter how many other conflicts are going on in Gaza or in Iran or Eritrea or in Libya or in Sudan, we're still talking about Ukraine. And quite rightly, I'm not saying we should talk about it more than the other conflicts that are going on. I wish, they all got the same kind of level of coverage. But it's just the way the news media works. If they've got something new to say, they'll say it. Otherwise, there was a civil war in Syria for over 10 years from 2011. And it got covered in the first few weeks of the conflict, maybe the first few months. But after that, news about it just really kind of petered out to such an extent that in Trump's first term, he pulled out American forces and left Kurds to die. Kurds who have been fighting against ISIS. They've been fighting against Assad's regime at the same time. And he pulled out, leaving them to Assad's regime. No one talks about that, do they? Anyway, but this strategy of Putin, these attacks last night, they look increasingly desperate rather than powerful, and Russia is losing territory. It's losing net territory at the moment. The casualty rates are horrific, and even pro-Kremlin military bloggers are becoming frustrated, which is quite brave. I talked a few weeks ago about this change in the wording about when they were talking about the war in Ukraine. Amongst political journalists and political bloggers in Russia, they were starting to use the term Putin's war. They were saying his war, your war, not our war, trying to make a separation from the Russian people, the Russian, the people talking about what's happening, the fifth columnists, I guess, and Putin himself. And so when you're seeing military bloggers who have been famously pro-Kremlin, just like so far up the Kremlin's arse they can see the future, turning on Putin, that's really worrying. But dictators escalate when they sense weakness. One of the reasons why the Argentinians invaded the Falkland Islands back in the early 80s was because the military junta that was in power at the time knew that the gig was up. The economy was failing, people were rebelling, people were pissed off at them. So why not have a war? Why not have a big kick-off war, and then we'll be back to number one? And that's just not the way it works. It might work if you win the war, but if you don't, then that's it. You're out. And in Russia's case, in the case of Putin, being out isn't going to be like, while he's out on his ear, he's after going to get another job. No, he's going to be dead. Simple as that. This is a matter of life and death for Vladimir Putin. That's why he's been continuing this war. That's why he can't stop. He cannot stop. We can talk about sunk cost fallacy, but the fact is that if he doesn't keep playing at the casino that he keeps losing at, he will die. It's just the fact that he keeps playing that's the only thing keeping him alive at the moment. But at some point, his losses are going to mount up and become so insurmountable. There's going to be nothing. There's going to be nothing we can do that he can do. Sorry. Putin may genuinely believe that only more violence can preserve his authority. But let's face it, escalation is the opposite of confidence. It just is. It's a sign of weakness. And we need to talk about the drone warfare, because this is kind of like one of the biggest stories of 2026, and it's quite remarkable of just how the drone the drone output of an innovation, the drone innovation of Ukraine has just shifted this war entirely. Ukraine has transformed itself into one of the most innovative drone warfare states on the planet. Ukraine cannot match Russia soldier for soldier, so it adapted technology, cheap drones with 3D printed parts that people are printing in their own kitchens, in their own homes. Swarm attacks, precision strikes, constant pressure on logistics, and they're doing really smart stuff. So I was reading recently what they're doing now. The prevailing winds in Ukraine blows towards Russia. That's why when the Muscovites realized what had happened in Ukraine with the Chernobyl meltdown, They wouldn't have been bothered if the prevailing wind had been going towards Europe, but the prevailing wind was going towards Belarus. It was going towards Russia. And that would mean radiation in the rain, radiation in the air, which would lead to cancers in hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people across Russia. And so they needed to do something about it. And you've probably watched the TV show Chernobyl, which does a good job pretty much of telling you why it all went down and what happened. They amalgamate some things and they change a couple of things in the timeline, but it's generally pretty faithful to what actually happened. It was never going to explode. There was never going to be a mushroom cloud. Radiation's much more like insidious than that. You've got to imagine radiation as billions of tiny bullets that go straight through you. And if one of those tiny bullets that's going straight through you hits a bit of your DNA, it can damage the DNA. And when the DNA reproduces, then there's a mutation in it. And most of the time, those mutations are benign, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes that radiation causes cancer. And this is what we're seeing. I mean, in the UK at the moment, skin cancer rates are going through the fucking roof. Because if you're like me and you're a bit short of melanin, you've got no natural protection other than wearing clothes, which some people don't want to do, even though I wish people would. Can you put some clothes on, please? It's no offense, but yeah, and everyone should wear a big hat, as far as I'm concerned. Sipping my iced water with fresh lemons and mint from the garden. Oh, that's nice. I'm having a nice hot cup of coffee. Absolutely, just the one. I don't drink anymore, and I'm on fluid restriction. You're welcome. So I've by the way, for tomorrow, I've got biscuits. I've bought loads of biscuits. I'm going to Jaffa cakes, but I've got milk chocolate digestives. I've got milk chocolate hobnobs. 2 packs. I've got a pack of ginger snaps, ginger nuts, and I've also got a pack of rich tea, like 2 big packs of rich tea. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But yeah, I might pop out to like Pound Stretchers today or something. Get a load more snacks to eat. What Americans class as cider is basically chemicals, aka cut rot. Yeah. Don't they call cider, and they call like apple juice cider, don't they, in America, even if it's not got, like ginger beer doesn't have alcohol in. Do they do the same with cider in America, or am I just making that up? Someone let me know. Anyway, so yeah, I was reading the other day about how this drone warfare that they're using, and one of the problems that they had in Ukraine when they were trying to fire these drones use these drones against the Russians. The Russians jam the signal, so you're on the whatever range of the broadcast spectrum you're on trying to operate this thing. So what they started to do is start using optic fiber. So there was a string which is now crisscrossed there's a whole slew of places all the way along the battlefront in Ukraine. That's absolutely, it looks like spider webs over the fields and up in the trees and stuff, and it's all these fiber optic cables. So what Ukraine have done is tried to move more towards autonomous drones using AI, that they're given a coordinate and then they've got a camera on them and they can identify the building or the vehicle or whatever it is, the aircraft that they're supposed to take out. And you have these swarm attacks. So no matter what digital defenses or broadcast defenses the Russians have, or if they try and shoot them out of the sky, it's just not doing any good. Also, the technology when it comes to defending themselves against drone attacks. So there was this massive attack yesterday on Ukraine, in which we're talking like thousands and thousands of rockets and hundreds of drones, dozens of missiles, and at least 83 people have been injured. However, they did manage to stop. The Ukrainian Air Force has said that it detected 90 missiles and 600 drones, but they did manage to shoot down nearly all of them. There was only a few that got through, and the few that got through obviously caused a lot of devastation. You only need one to get through to kill someone. But their defense, the drone defense, has come on in leaps and bounds. But also, I love I hate war and I hate violence, obviously, but the innovation that has come about in Ukraine. So more recently, I was mentioning about the prevailing wind. The reason why I mentioned that is that the canny Ukrainians went, why don't we use a technology that's like hundreds of years old to get these drones further into Russia? So what they've been doing is they've been sending these drones up in balloons, because the balloons just drift over towards Russia anyway. So for the first 100 miles of getting into Russian territory, the wind will take it. And then the drone turns on, once you're 100 miles in, and suddenly you've got a drone that did have a range of 150 miles, say. It now has a range of 250 miles, so it can get a lot further into Russia. And if it's autonomous, then it can pick its targets and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of innovation coming. And Putin, he's very old school. He's very much like he's still locked in that sort of Cold War mentality. That's why he attacked Ukraine at the start of this, or the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, with tanks, because he thought, right, tanks, that's the way to go. And it turned out that tanks were possibly the worst thing that he could actually try and attack Ukraine with, because you'd have a big column of tanks. All the Ukrainians need to do is blow up the first one, and then they're all stuck. They've got nowhere to go. They try and turn around. There's 100 of them in a row, and then they just take out the one at the back. And then all these tanks are trapped. There's trees either side of the road. They can't get off the road. And the Ukrainians just took them off one by one. It's terrible, terrible, terrible. And so along with not seeing that the Ukrainian people would fight to the last person in Ukraine, because it's their home and they don't want to be Russian. They don't want their children to be taken away and to be educated the Russian way in, Vladivostok on the other side of the planet. They're fighting back. They will continue fighting back. Putin didn't see that, and this is because Putin doesn't know love. Trump's the same, and so is Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage. These people have never known love. They only know this very transactional relationship with other human beings. Everything's transactional to these people. They're out there to just feather their own nest, to do all right for themselves and screw everybody else, And the other thing that Putin got so wrong is he never had the imagination to think about how Ukraine might fight back. And it makes me think about the way that the Vietnamese fought back against the US invasion in the 60s and the early 70s. They didn't have the tech that the Americans had. They didn't have helicopters, napalm, and Agent Orange, and all this horrible shit. They couldn't mine entire fucking swathes of land in Vietnam. So they had to be smarter about it. What could they do? Well, they set up traps in the jungle. They set up traps that the Americans. You go to the Chi Chi tunnels in Vietnam and go have they're tunneled underground. And Vietnamese pop up, shoot some Americans, go back under the tunnel, and it was all covered, so people didn't know. The Americans are like, where did they come from? They set up these traps, and they were just like really basic traps, like kind of stuff that you'd see in a, like that Kevin McAllister would set up in Home Alone, like that's the kind of trap. I mean, I'm laughing, but I mean, these were really great. These were like pits they're like imagine a board that's covered in leaves because it's on the jungle floor, right? And it's covered in undergrowth and stuff, and you step on it, and it's got a pivot in the middle, so you fall down, and that flips up, and you fall into the trap, and there's spikes in the trap. You're dead, or you're injured, and you're screaming, "Help! Get me out of here!" But the trap has reset itself because it's spun all the way around, and now it just looks like the jungle floor again because that's the way they made it look. And these really simple ways of attacking the Americans, who were a nuclear-armed power, for God's sake, with the cutting-edge technology, these jet planes that they had in the 1960s and the early 70s. And yet, for all of the horrible things that the Americans did in Vietnam, they couldn't beat the Viet Minh. They just couldn't do it, or the Viet Cong, as they called them. And you're seeing the same thing again in Ukraine. It's driving the innovation of Ukrainians to be clever and think of clever, cost-effective ways of beating back the Russians, right? And the fun thing here, right, is that America didn't get this. Trump doesn't understand this, right? Trump doesn't understand this at all. He thinks that by cutting off the funding coming from Congress, that's it. Ukraine's over. They're going to not be able to fight back against the Russians. But Ukraine have flipped the script on that as well. They're gone, well, we've got enough. We can go for the next few years on what we've got, what we've already been given by the Biden regime, and what we've been given them promised by the EU. That's enough, because war for them isn't as expensive as war for America. It isn't as expensive as war for Russia. And I think I saw a stat the other day that for every one Ukrainian soldier who's getting killed, something like 10 or maybe more Russian soldiers are getting killed. That is a rate of attrition that even a country as big as Russia just cannot keep up for long, especially without bringing in a draft, which Putin is loath to do because he wants to pretend that this is all separate. This is. Don't worry about. He's saying to the Russian people, don't worry about this. This is nothing to do with you. I'm getting these mercenaries in from North Africa, from North Korea, and they're going to fight this war on your behalf. Sorry, special military operation. Ms. Paula Thomas, thank you very much for the first super chat of the morning. Drone units in Ukraine are allowed to tinker with the drones, for example, by changing batteries or munitions, or even printing different body parts. Yeah. They encourage. Well, that's another systemic problem with the mentality in Russia. It's like, and this is one of the reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed. So I don't mean to make sweeping statements. There was a lot of reasons why the Soviet Union collapsed. I mentioned Afghanistan quite a lot. The reality was, at the time, Russia had the biggest army in the world. It had the biggest fucking nuclear arsenal and all that kind of stuff. But it couldn't afford to feed its people, and that's basically why it all came down. People were like, "I want food." But one of the other reasons is, as Soviet Union went on, it became more and more risk averse. And when Russian scientists or Soviet scientists made breakthroughs, there was a lot of prejudice if they weren't from the correct part of the Soviet Union, and a lot of these discoveries were left they didn't do anything about it. They didn't capitalize on. And then, look, I know there's a whole thing about hindsight is 2020. I get that, but it is just a bit kind of it's kind of interesting that they should have made more of the innovations that were presented to them, but they were quite old-fashioned and bureaucratic in the way that they approached allowing people the freedom to come up with ideas. They didn't like that. They wanted all ideas controlled by the state. Not much has changed since Russia became, Russia. We've got Judge George only there, member for 32 months. See combat veteran news. Is Putin running a false flag? And how Russia accuses Ukraine of doing what Russia does to Ukraine every fucking day. Yeah. I know. I absolutely agree. The Russia is just very much on that whole disinformation, misinformation trip, and it has been for a long time. It has been, and when you see some techniques, especially we get whataboutism a lot, and I try and not do it, and I don't want to say, oh, this is a bad thing that's happening in the world. Why aren't we talking about this other bad thing that's happening, or why are we talking? I try to be as equal with my time as possible when I'm talking about this stuff, and I should talk about Sudan more. But it's one of the things where, what's there to talk about? It's awful. It's dreadful. I'll raise awareness of it, but I'm pretty sure that if I did a whole show about what's happening in Sudan, I don't know if anyone would watch it till the end, to be honest with you. I mean, I could bring it in, mentioning it while I'm talking about other stuff. And when I'm going for the record tomorrow, which I might not do, don't get your hopes up. I mean, I might fall asleep halfway through. But if I manage to do it, I really want to be able to talk about each country in the world. So obviously Sudan will be part of that story. So yeah, as part of another show is fine. But whataboutism is a thing that was perfected by the Soviets back in like the 60s or 70s. They were like, oh, you think it's bad that all you got to eat is this cold moldy potato, but what about what's happening in America? And they'll point out like race riots or civil rights movements or something horrible that's happened in America. They go, what about this? What about that? What about? And it's as a political technique, you see it a lot on the right wing, but the left do it as well. Where it's like whatever your pet project is, you'll be constantly banging on about, asking people to talk more about your pet project, especially if you're acutely aware that not many people are talking about it. So I understand why, but yeah, I don't think that when we raise awareness of a political issue, if I say, oh my God, what's happening in Sudan is dreadful. I don't get this from you, so don't worry about it. I'm not talking to you here, but imagine like everyone in the chat is screaming at me, but what about Gaza? And I'm like, well, we talked about Gaza. I mean, know that it's a bad situation, but in this particular episode, I'm talking about Sudan. But it was Russia, it was the Muscovites, it was the Russian Empire, or as it was known, Soviet Union, who pushed that idea, and they made it mainstream, especially when the internet came along. Whataboutism. What about this? What about this? There's another thing called Odeirism, which was not Russia's fault necessarily, but this came about after the sort of Biafra famine, the Biafra conflict in the late 60s. It was the first time that people saw people starving, like no one, the liberation of the concentration camps at the end of World War II, that wasn't broadcast around the world, but the famine in Biafra in Nigeria, it was. And then obviously 20 years later, my generation grew up with images of children starving in Ethiopia, and you watch it and you go, oh shit, I want to do something. I want to do something to stop, because it's an innate human desire to not see other people suffer. So if you see someone who's done a mischief to themselves, or that they don't have enough food, or they're starving, or they don't have enough water, there is an innate human desire to help them out. That's how humans have succeeded. If we were all selfish twats like Farage or Trump or Putin, we would have been wiped out eons ago. We would have never got out of the trees, But when it comes to most normal people, you want to help out, right? So in 1985, we had Live Aid, and people helped out. They got on the phone, they could give some money, and they could help out. But then, what's happened more recently in the 1990s, with the launch of BBC News 24, CNN, these 24-hour news channels, is that there's been just so many things all happening all at the same time. It becomes overwhelming. We get an equivalent of choice paralysis, and we want to help, but there's so many things happening. How do we help everyone? And then we end up saying, oh dear, that's why it's called Odeirism. We end up saying, oh dear, and not actually doing anything about it. This was brought up in the mini documentary by Thingy Curtis. What's his name? John Curtis? No, it's not John Curtis. Richard Curtis. No, he wrote Blackadder and Four Weddings and a Funeral. Thingy Curtis. Ian Curtis. No, he was in Joy Division. One of the Curtises. One of the many Curtises, who was privately educated. Of course, he gets to make documentaries. But yeah, this Odeirism is a way of stopping people from actually doing anything about it. You got whataboutism, where you go, well, that's bad, what about this? And then you got Odeirism, where it's kind of like distress, overwhelm. That's why I'll always say, if you've got a particular issue, stick to it, and don't let people tell you, oh, but you should also be worried about X, Y, Z, because you don't have the time. You just don't have the time. You don't have the headspace. Gallifrey, man, I think the 24-hour news cycle is on par with social media and smartphones for bad things we've invented for ourselves. Yeah. Labour comes in a nutshell. Venter's right, minimum wage up, lots of other good stuff. But look at Starmer getting some glasses, or Rayner fiddling at taxes, even though she got cleared. Yeah, Shinzad, you're absolutely right. Hi, Ernie. Ernie Burns in the chat. Jimmy says, you might have already answered this, Graham, but are you covering disputed nation states? Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be, because when I travel to every country, I also travel to Palestine. I travel to Kosovo. which is regarded as a nation state by over 100 countries in the world, including ours. Palestine is now recognised as a nation state by this country and has been now since last year, when the Labour government said, no, we've got Palestine as a country now, much to Netanyahu's chagrin. I'll be covering that. Obviously, Taiwan isn't a member of the UN, but I went there twice actually. Western Sahara, which is the break. It was the old Spanish Sahara. I'll explain this tomorrow. It's old Spanish Sahara. When the Spanish pulled out in 1975, the whole region just fell into war, basically, because Morocco came down from the north, said we want this, and Algeria came from the east and said we want this, and Mauritania came from the south and said we want this, because they thought there might be like minerals or oil or something, I don't know. The people of Western Sahara were never given a real voice, although there are technically 54 countries in Africa, but there's 55 members of the African Union, because Western Sahara is a member of the African Union as a representative, which is quite interesting. But also, I'll be talking about Somaliland. I'll be talking about, when I talk about other countries, I'll have to mention South Ossetia and Abkhazia in Georgia, which are the breakaway republics, which have been just taken over by Moscow. So obviously I'll be talking about a little bit. I don't want to get too bogged down in it though, because obviously there are a lot of secessionists around the world. Alberta is now, some of the people in Alberta are pushing for it to secede from Canada, which is going to be bonkers. What, you want a little square country in the middle of North America? Okay, fine, whatever. But Alberta's rural farmland, it's fertile, ground for growing crops and racism, and they want to break off from the rest of Canada. But apparently, there's only about 25% of the people there actually want it. So if it did go to a referendum, I don't think that it would go too far. I don't know, but it just seems it would be a little bit like Lincolnshire pulling out of England. You'd be like, what? Why are you doing this? Just odd. But yeah, and there were certain people in Alberta who want to be ruled by Donald Trump. It's fine. Go to America. If you don't want to be ruled by, and he's not going to live forever. You do know that. So all these dickheads in Alberta, in Canada, going, oh, we want to be ruled by America. We want to be ruled by Trump. Yeah, when Trump carks it, and eventually the Democrats get back in power, you're going to be ruled over by Obama Mark II. So what'd you do that for? But yeah, anyway. So yeah, I will be covering disputed areas. But also I'll be talking about the countries. So Somalia is one of my go-tos, because Somalia is made up of two countries originally, or two territories, whatever you want to call it. There were originally three. There was Italian Somalia, British Somalia, and French Somalia. French Somalia became an independent state, which is known as Djibouti. The British Somalia and Italian Somalia got lumped together. And as a result of them getting lumped together, the people who live in old British Somalia, which is now called Somaliland, it's an autonomous region. It's a breakaway region with its own capital, its own flag, its own parliament, free and fair elections. Hello, and its own money. It's got its own currency. I've got a bank of, where is it? Somewhere on my table down here. You can't see, but I've got all my banknotes. But yeah, Somaliland has its own currency, a shilling. The Somaliland shilling. Where is my Somaliland shilling? Seychelles. Sorry, you can't see what I'm looking at here. I've got a $2 bill. Who's on? There you go, quiz time. Who is on the American $2 bill? Bank of South Sudan, Bank of Guyana, Bank of Costa Rica, Republic of Paraguay. I don't know. Bank of Uganda, Eritrea, Zambia, New Zealand. I don't know. Can't find it. Hey peeps. Hello, Billy Kershaw. How you doing? What would have been cool when you did your around the world without flying? You left your house and then finished at your house and said, "Put the kettle on, I'm home." Yeah. Well, actually, Sarah, in February of 2010, right? I had travelled around Africa, and I needed to get visas for Libya and Algeria, and I needed to be in London to get them. Now, technically speaking, I probably could have just posted my passport to my parents in Liverpool, and my dad or someone could have travelled down to London and got the visas and then sent them over to me in Istanbul. But that whole process would have taken a couple of weeks, and I thought, well, I've got a couple of weeks, I could go and get the visas myself. So I didn't tell my parents, didn't tell anyone. I was in Istanbul, and I literally got the overnight bus up to Cologne in Germany, and then I got on the bus to London and then the train up to Liverpool without telling anyone. And except my brother, my older brother, my oldest brother, I told him, and all my family were around at my parents' house in Liverpool for like a Sunday dinner, and I told them that I was gonna, get onto Skype and we'll have a chat together, and it'd be really cool. And so I set up the Skype call, and my brother had let me into the house. And I'd snuck upstairs. I was in the upstairs room of the house, like on my laptop in like my old bedroom, and yeah, my mum was like, "Oh, the signal's not very good." I'm like, "Oh, should have come down and it might be better." And I just like walked into the lounge. My mum was like, "Ah!" So that was really fun. So yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, did occur to me. Put the kettle on. I'm done. I always like the idea of like leaving a note just on the door saying "Gone to Egypt." Back soon, back whenever. But yeah, that was really fun. Gallifreyan Wren, oh yes. Continuing my trend of pointing out why my life as a trans woman is better than Rowling's. I'm finding happiness in strawberries and a roast dinner. Ooh, I may even snooze. Your move, Voldemort. I love it. UK news: Treasury reject ministers' plans to cut VAT on public EV charging to 5%. I wonder who lobbied Reeves to block that then. That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? The amount of power these oil fiends have over us is it's just disgraceful. Anyway, so yeah, just talking about what Putin's downfall, I think. The drone warfare has changed everything with the cheap drones, the swarm attacks, the precision strikes, the constant pressure on logistics for Russia, and Russians' assumptions about the dominance of manpower and having the more people that they can throw into the grind are being challenged. The massive infantry assaults are increasingly vulnerable, and you're having these assaults where the entire group of Russians running at them with the guns are being taken out, and not a single Ukrainian is getting injured because they're sitting miles away, with operating the drones. Also, the supply depots obviously vulnerable. Ukraine has taken out oil infrastructure, and that includes oil refineries. Also taken out ports as well, where the terminals where the oil is put onto the ships. They've taken them out. The airfields, that audacious attack last year when the container opened up with the drones inside it, absolutely remarkable, and they filmed it as well. I mean, balls, and the fact that Moscow itself is vulnerable. We talked a couple of weeks ago when Moscow was doing its Red Square parade, and this snarky message that came out of Kyiv from Vladimir Zelensky saying, "Yeah, we will give you permission to have your parade." That must have really stung. That must have really, really stung Putin. The psychological effect of all this has really started to trickle down by the looks of things. Putin promised ordinary Russians that they could ignore the war. It was someone else's problem. That promise is collapsing. Flights are disrupted. The internet's been shut down. The air defense systems are everywhere. There's sirens going off. People cowering in basements. There's explosions near Moscow. There's constant anxiety. People aren't being able to sleep properly in their beds because they're too worried about what might happen next, which is what the Ukrainians have had to put up with since February 2022. So, I mean, I don't have much sympathy for Putin. I've got sympathy for the Russian people. It's not their fault, but the top brass who have protected Putin and allowed him to indulge his bullshit revisionism historical narrative where he says, Ukraine was always part of Russia. No, it wasn't. In fact, when Ukraine win this war, I think they should rename Russia Eastern Ukraine. Fuck them. Make them all speak Ukrainian. They'd love that, wouldn't they? But yeah, the constant anxiety thing, it can't last for long, especially when, and this is really important, wars I learned about this when I was studying about Vietnam. Wars are won by winning the battle of the hearts and minds. They're not won by one side having bigger ships or bigger planes or more missiles. It's a battle of hearts and minds. And when you're fighting for a cause, then yeah, you'll get behind it. The Nazis were very good at this, at getting people to fight for the cause, right? But when it comes to something like Russia, this is supposed to be someone else's war that the Russian people aren't really involved in. They're getting dragged into this war more and more by the day. What are they fighting for? What's your average Russian on the streets of Moscow or St. Petersburg or Vladivostok? What are they? What's this war got to do with them? They're not fighting for the Russian glory. They're not fighting for some revisionist, tale narrative. They're just not. There's nothing there to get behind. Whereas, the people in Ukraine are fighting for their survival of their country, for everything they know and love, the survival of their loved ones, the survival of their language, the survival of their culture, the survival of their religion. And that's something people will defend to the death. Russia, this is a war of aggression. And apart from Russian glory, there's nothing in it. There's just nothing in it for the Russian people, not that they can see. I mean, there might be some fucking minerals that they can get out of Ukraine. There might be some farmland, because obviously the farmland in Russia is terrible. It's one of the reasons why they always want to expand and take over other people's countries, because they've got the biggest country in the world, but most of it's a fucking wasteland. Most of it, the vast majority of Russia is either a frozen wasteland or a toxic wasteland. So yeah, you've got to look at it sort of like World War II, Japan after the Marianas campaign, America after the Tet Offensive, moments where populations of countries just start suddenly realize, maybe we're not winning. Maybe we aren't on the front foot here. Maybe we're on the back foot. And one of Putin's biggest failures and one of his lies that he told his people, he was gonna take out NATO. NATO was going to be destroyed, and he's going to make them pay for. He says that they told him that that they wouldn't have any new people, any new members of NATO. That was a promise they made him. They didn't make that promise to him. They didn't make that promise to anyone. It was never laid out in a treaty. It was never laid out in anything official. Do you know what was laid out officially? There was an agreement between Russia and America and Ukraine that if Ukraine gave up its nuclear missiles, then its borders would be respected by America and by Russia. That was a proper treaty. That was signed. They had a ceremony and everything. Whereas this tale that Putin and Putin apologists like to tell, this lie about, did you know what really happened? No. That's not what really happened. Viper Scott, Ren, faces. I love that. But yeah, this is Putin's biggest failure. He's made NATO stronger. It's one of the biggest geopolitical own goals in modern history. He invaded Ukraine to weaken NATO, in the same way that he backed Brexit and he backed Trump to weaken NATO. But instead, Finland joined NATO, Sweden joined NATO, the European defence spending surged, anti-Russian sentiment hardened around Europe, and Russia lost influence at extraordinary speed. The leverage that Russia had over Europe with gas, that has significantly weakened. These countries all around Europe started looking elsewhere for their gas. The economic integration with nations around Russia has absolutely collapsed. Russian cultural prestige has been damaged, and Russian the reputation of the military has been absolutely shattered. Like it's been fucked beyond repair. And even countries that are traditionally cautious about confrontation have become hawkish. You've seen Poland. You've seen Germany rearming effectively. Germany has abandoned decades of restraint. Eastern Europe increasingly sees Russia as an existential threat. And, Putin accidentally sort of revived Western unity after years of fragmentation. And this is when we talk about the economic pressure inside Russia. Putin has kept Russia relatively insulated from early on, the the costs are on the periphery, and it was areas like regions like Chechnya, which are miles away from St. Petersburg, miles away from Moscow, disproportionately recruited people to the front line. Moscow elites still going to restaurants and parties. The shop that was called Nike was now called Mike. The shop that was called McDonald's, the takeaway place, is now called McDowell's or something. It's the same place selling the same food. It's just got a different name. You can still get your trainers. You can still get your your clothes because they're made in Bangladesh. And that insulation from what was going on in Ukraine is disappearing rapidly by the day, especially when Ukraine attacks. And this is one of the reasons why Ukraine is attacking more civilian targets in Russia, which, all things being equal, I don't want them to do that because I don't want civilians to be dragged into this war. But Putin started this, and he attacked civilians as he did last night. Four civilians are dead and 83 are injured after the attacks last night. They're civilians. They're not working on the front line. They're just normal people going about trying to go about their daily life. So you've got you've got inflation rising in Russia. You've got taxes rising. Infrastructure is being neglected. This is a big thing as well. We're not seeing much about in the news, but when you think about the infrastructure of a country, especially one as big as Russia, you've got to take care of stuff: the bridges, the aqueducts, the viaducts, the tunnels, the roads. There's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done on these things, especially roads, potholes, the railways. The things get taken out by a drone strike, and then you've got all of your engineers, all of your steel, all of your stuff going to that one area to try and fix that thing up that's critical to the country functioning. Meanwhile, your everyday infrastructure is getting neglected even more than it ever did before. I mean, it's always been a bit neglected in Russia because that's just the way the Russian system is. It's incredibly corrupt. You give someone 1 million rubles to fix the road, they'll pocket half of it for themselves, and then pay someone off the amount to do it up for them, and they'll pocket a big bunch of it themselves. Farage now saying people won't pay tax on overtime hours, and people are actually falling for it. Of course they are. Sheffield Steve, I could have been in the Guinness Book of Records for most swear words used building a flat pack piece of furniture. Very good, very good. I like that. I have a joke for you. I have a joke. Hang on a sec. I need to make sure that I thought of this yesterday. So if you follow me on Facebook, it's going to be even worse because you already heard it. So apparently the Prime Minister is he's writing an autobiography about his love for flat pack furniture. It's called IKEA. Anyway, super chats are open. Are you having other contributors on with you or to keep you company when you go for your record? Black Dot, no, I don't think I am. And the reason for that is, right, I don't want to give Guinness World Records any reason to say, no, you can't have the record. So it's got to be solo. If I'm saying I'm doing it solo, it's got to be solo. So it's just essentially going to be a filibuster. Don't forget, I do get 5 minutes off every hour. So if I go for 12 hours straight without taking a break, well, obviously I'll have to go to the loo. But that'll give me 60 minutes to sleep. So if I can go for 36 hours straight without stopping, I can sleep for an hour and still have half an hour spare, which might happen. So you might have the indignity of seeing me go over to that couch over there and I'll keep it rolling. I mean, I'm going to stop live streaming, but I'm allowed to take a break, a comfort break, as they call it, for 5 minutes of every hour, but I can bank them. I just don't want to give Guinness any reason to say no. Guinness loves saying no. Like, I've experienced this so many times. I've done stuff and then gone, ta-da! And they're like, oh, well, you went to every country in Europe in 3 weeks. Yeah, that's quite impressive, isn't it? Yeah, but we don't regard Turkey and Cyprus as being in Europe. went to every country in Europe without flying in 3 weeks. And they were like, no, not accepting that. And I had a friend who did the longest journey by electric car across the US and Canada. This is like 15 years ago when electric cars were quite hard to charge. They didn't accept his record because he had to break down. There was like a really minor reason why they said no. So yeah, you've got to be very careful with Guinness World Records. You know, they're lovely people, but they're more inclined, especially when it's a new record that hasn't been set before. They're more likely to say, well, you didn't, after the event. And this is why I keep stressing, this is going to be a record attempt tomorrow. It might be my first attempt. And then I'm going to learn things. And then on my second attempt or third attempt, I might actually do it. Okay, so lock in. I'm going to try my best, but obviously things are going to come up that I haven't really thought of, that I haven't planned ahead for. So things like I've got to be aware of how long I'm streaming for. I can't stream for more than 12 hours on this platform, on YouTube. I'm actually going to have it set up so I'm going to be streaming on 3 platforms at once, right? I'm going to be streaming on Twitch. I'm going to be streaming on TikTok, I hope, if it allows me to stream that long. I don't know if I've got a good enough TikTok account to be able to do that. But if I can, I'll stream on TikTok on my phone. So then I'll have like basically 3 different ways of watching the show. I will have to stop this show once every 12 hours because otherwise the show doesn't save to YouTube. If you do a show more than 12 hours, it doesn't save to YouTube apparently. So 11 hours and 45 minutes, I'll knock it off and then instantly restart the next one. George, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. It's very kind of you. Western investors helped Russia to rebuild its oil industry after the collapse of the USSR, which Putin has no intention of paying for. Yes. Yeah. I mean, America, we had the Marshall Plan with America. They had a similar thing for Russia when Russia went into democracy mode in the early 90s to help Russia get back on its feet. They just took all the money. They just took all the money and kept it. And then they managed to pay off the loan a lot earlier than they thought they were going to do because of all the corruption that was going on in Russia at the time. Andrew Ray, thank you very much. £5 super chat. Good luck for tomorrow. Are you getting 10 hours sleep tonight? Who has the most Guinness Book records and how many? There is a guy who has, okay, I could Google that for you. Who has the most Guinness World Records? It's a guy called Adam Ash Ritter Furman. He has set over 700 official records since 1979 and currently holds over 200 records, thus holding the Guinness World Record for the most Guinness World Records. He's been breaking records since 1979. And he's 71 years old. He's been a pioneer in setting several records. So he's come up with great ideas for records, which is something I would really recommend. If you want to get a Guinness World Record, these two are for doing something that no one's done before. In fact, the Guinness World Record I get on the podcast, on the Guinness World Record podcast that you can watch tomorrow, it was dead easy because no one had done it before, or it had never been counted as a record before. It's the most countries, most capital cities in Europe identified by a landmark in a minute, and I did 20 of them in a minute, that's dead easy to beat. I mean, I could beat that. Having another go, I can have a second go. I can do 26 easily. I wouldn't think I have to take my hat off. A good way of doing it is, if you want a Guinness World Record, is to invent one. But you have to square it with them first and make sure that they're happy with the rules that are set. So, for instance, when I talked about my Guinness World Records for going to every country, obviously I tried to put in things that meant that if something bad happened to me or a member of my family, so if I was airlifted out of a situation because I was in a bus crash or something, it wouldn't stop the record. If I've been traveling for 2.5 years overland and then I was airlifted out of a situation, I'm like, what happens then? Well, and they said, if you go back to the point where you left off, we'll count it as one continuous journey because you're not flying as part of the journey, and that's a clear distinction. And that was picked up from Carl Bushby, who does the guy who's walking from the south tip of South America all the way back to Hull. And he should be coming back this summer. I think he gets back to Hull this summer. But he had to break off that journey so many times. That's why it's taken him over 30 years to do this bloody thing. Almost 30 years. And one of the reason is he kept getting deported from Russia. But he was quite clear that it didn't matter if he flew. It didn't matter if he got in a car and went somewhere. As long as he went back to the point he left off, he could continue the journey on, which is fair enough. And obviously, in my journey to every country in the world, I had to go home because my sister was dying of cancer. So I think if you were doing something like this and you didn't go home when your sister was dying of cancer, then you'd just be doing what I did, but just with no morals, no heart, no love. Especially if you were, I don't know, sponsored by an oil company to do it. I mean, could you imagine if you were sponsored by an oil company to try to prove that you can visit every country in the world without flying? But yeah, luckily I proved it. So there you go. And that's why I've got the Guinness World Record, and I'm going to keep the Guinness World Records because, fucking did it. Funny story about the Guinness Book of Records. It was made in public over a group of friends trying to break records over a pint of Guinness. That part may not be true, but the rest is. Well, it was to sort out pub arguments, wasn't it? Because people have a fight in the pub about stuff. Is there a Guinness record for drinking Guinness? I'm absolutely sure there is. The goal only wants light blue super chats, no confetti today. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a bit odd, isn't it, that the confetti thing isn't working? But what I'll do is I'll remove that. Usually it doesn't matter. It's like it's light blue super chats, but and anything above. Someone's left a £2 super chat, which is light blue, so it's light blue and higher. So I'm just gonna go one super chat, all the colours. I'll set that. So because we need to do the confetti next one anyway, because we've had 4, I think. But yeah, one more super chat and we'll do that. We all love Ren and our fellow trans friends. Yes, we absolutely do, Chris C. The trans people I know are the most lovely people I've ever met in my life, and I just hate that there's just so much bigotry in the world still because people are just fucking easily led, aren't they? They're easily led. Yeah, the first record Furman set was by doing two. This is the guy who's got all the different records, by doing 27,000 jumping jacks. In 1986, Furman invented and set the record for underwater pogo stick jumping and introduced it on Good Morning America on April Fool's Day. Brilliant. Yeah, so just think of a record and then set it, and then I see it as throwing down the gauntlet to say, beat this. And the reason why the Guinness World Record I got on last month for in the podcast, in the Guinness World Record podcast, which gets published tomorrow, the reason why it was they said it's dead easy, but it throws down the gauntlet to someone to try and beat it, and then they'll get a Guinness World Record, and that'd be cool. So yeah, that's the setup. That's the setup. I hate that we live in a world where good people like your sister has gone and Farage is still breathing. And come on, Butler and Lambert, do your thing. Yeah, she died in 2011 as well. So if that was the same year that Farage survived that plane crash, the pilot didn't. Well, he survived for an extra 2 years, and then because he was so neglected by Farage, he was a multi-millionaire and could have paid for his medical help and help with his business and help with his mental health. But he didn't because he's Farage and he doesn't know love. He'll never know love. He's just out for himself. Yeah, that pilot's no longer with us. Saz, thank you very much for the £2 super chat. I don't know if that worked. I don't know if that worked for the confetti. Saz is saying confetti. So the guy who's the record for the most records just wants to be better at everything. He definitely took the craft to heart. Well, you can break records and you can set records. I will just say that it's easier to set a record than to break it. But put down the gauntlet. I mean, for instance, my record, I was traveling like a maniac for the first sort of year of my travels. I went to 133 countries in 1 year. And then the second year, I kicked back a bit. I went to 50 countries. I enjoyed myself. I went on a trip to see the Great Wall of China. I wasn't rushing. I went to see the Persepolis complex in Persepolis in near Shiraz in Iran. I went to these places with the intention of actually seeing the place, which I didn't do in the first year. I was just rattling through too fast. I was getting really stressed out about when I miss a bus connection or a boat didn't leave or something. I was trapped somewhere for a few weeks. But yeah, in the second year, third year, fourth year, I did take it easy. And one of the reasons why was because I wasn't trying to beat anyone's record. I was just trying to set it. But I reckon it can be done in 2 years. I reckon I could probably do it in 18 months. Not right now, because obviously there's countries you can't really get into. But yeah, maybe in the future I'll do it again, and I'll obviously smash my record out of the blast my record out of the water. Graham does. That's not true, Graham. Farage does love one thing. That's not being in Clacton. Yeah. Number 3. Thank you very much for the super chat. So Sazza's and number 3's super chat haven't actually made the confetti come down in the chat, but I will do that for you now. So thank you very much to everyone who's dropped the super chat in. Thanks, Richard, there. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. Confetti! Woo! Yay! We did it! Woo, 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 woo. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. Hey, these aren't half bad. No, they're all bad. Okay, so yeah, back onto just the wrap up on Putin. My Sunday sermon. Yeah, like I say, Putin kept Moscow relatively insulated. He kept the elites in Moscow relatively insulated. But now the internet's gone off. That's pissing a lot of people off. That's kind of like a massive symbolic issue. Russians are furious about shutdowns. I mean, you know, imagine suddenly losing, not just going on Facebook and looking at bloody cat memes, but navigation apps. You know, your Google Maps ain't going to work. Banking access, can't do anything on your banks. Communications, the state is increasingly, Russia is increasingly resembling a paranoid digital dictatorship. And Putin's regime used to offer rising living standards, stability, predictability, a benevolent dictatorship. This is the way he put out his store. But now it offers what? Censorship, repression, militarization, economic anxiety, and endless war. And the authoritarian systems survive hardship better when they offer hope. And Putin increasingly offers sacrifice without purpose. And this is sort of, you know, one of the biggest questions in authoritarian systems. Does the dictator understand reality? There are growing reports that Russian generals are feeding Putin optimistic nonsense in the same way that you see with Trump. You know, the way with Trump when he has these meetings with his cabinet and they just blow smoke up his ass. They all keep telling him that the victory is imminent and that Donbass is nearly secured, Ukraine is collapsing. This is classic dictator bubble behavior. You know, they surround themselves with incompetent people who lie to them. It happened with Saddam Hussein, it happened with Hitler, it happened with Stalin. Leaders become isolated and subordinates fear telling the truth. Famously, Hitler wasn't woken up on D-Day on the 6th of June 1944. He was not woken up because it's to be told that the full-scale invasion of the European continent the continental Europe had started. They didn't want to wake him up because they were scared that he might shout at them. Then he might wake up in a bad mood. Putin built a system based on fear and loyalty rather than competence. He doesn't want competent people around him because competent people might challenge him for leadership. So he makes sure that everyone around him is absolutely incompetent. Same thing with what's his name? Vladimir Farage. Farage, that's the one. He is a Russian patsy, but also he surrounds himself with incompetent people. Like the people around Farage are just utterly incompetent. Look at the council in Kirklees where it's like standing up going, I don't understand what a standing order is. I don't understand what this is. This is unconstitutional. You can't make me find out things. You can't make me spend the night afternoon on Wikipedia looking up these things. It's unconstitutional to do that. I don't know what these things mean. It's your fault. It's your fault that I don't know what these things mean. It's your fault that I'm so fucking lazy. I couldn't be bothered finding out. He surrounds himself with incompetence. Look at the people he's taken from the Tories. Neanderthal, utterly incompetent. Suella Braverman, the worst Home Secretary of all time. The woman who said, I'm going to stop immigration. And the immigration spiked at over 1 million. And Robert Jennevick, who was the immigration minister. Yeah. Edinburgh is lovely, but then I'm biased. Kitty, I absolutely 100% agree with you. Edinburgh is one of my favourite places on earth. Genuinely. Take it from a very well-travelled person. It's phenomenal. It's great. So this happens repeatedly with authoritarian systems. So you've seen it with Trump, you've seen it with Farage, you saw it with Saddam Hussein, you saw it with Hitler, you saw it with Stalin. Leaders become isolated, and no one wants to tell them what's really going on. And this creates disastrous sort of disinformation loops, well, going around that everyone tells the boss what they think the boss wants to hear. And so you got to ask now, is Putin delusional, or is he trapped in the system that he created? Is he trapped in the bubble? Or is it both? It doesn't have to be either or. He can be delusional and trapped in the bubble. But there is increasing signs that Russian elites are psychologically detaching themselves from Putin. And this is not necessarily rebelling, but mentally preparing for a future in which he is no longer the leader. Reports of officials referring to the war as his project rather than ours, which I mentioned. That linguistic shift really does matter. It signals blame, displacement. No one wants the ownership of failure. Success has what's the expression? Success has 1,000 fathers, and failure has none. Isn't that it? Yeah. The Russian oligarchs are terrified. Their assets being seized, arbitrary state interventions, fear everywhere, and loyalty no longer guarantees protection. So Putin's system is increasingly cannibalizing itself. The loyalists are being purged, businesses nationalized, infighting is intensifying, and the mood sounds less revolutionary than sort of fatalistic. I mean, that the elites might not necessarily be plotting. We don't know, and I'm not going to be one of those YouTube channels that incessantly tells you Putin's on his last legs. Oh, he's going to be dead next week. Oh, he's got cancer. He's dying. They were saying that in 2022. You had bloggers on here who were like, Putin's dying. This war's going to be over next week, and I'm sitting there going, stop it. You don't know. You don't. The same ones who go, oh my God, Trump is so fucked. He's going to be taken to court, and they're going to find him guilty, and he's going to go to jail for 100,000 billion years. And I'm like, no, he's not. I believe it when I see it. I believe it when the money's in the bank account. Anyway, so Putin. Easy mistake to make. Let's look at some of the different scenarios that could happen quickly. Putin could stay in power, but becomes more repressive, and this is the most likely short-term scenario, clearly. He responds to his own weakness with more censorship, more arrests, greater internet controls, greater militarization, intensified propaganda. And Russia sort of slowly evolves into something equating to a wartime police state, a sort of semi-totalitarian nation. Semi-totalitarian nationalism, and you're going to see more young Russians fleeing abroad, which you've already seen, which is going to make the brain drain even worse than it already is. You damage the economy weakens further, and the danger is that weakened dictators become more dangerous externally. Escalation abroad compensates for weakness at home, and you've got more risks, more possible attacks on civilians, cyber warfare, escalation, sabotage operations happening in and across Europe, and threats including nuclear rhetoric. I mean, that's one way that we might see things go, especially in the short term. But in the longer term, I do think that there is going to be a palace coup at some point. I don't know where it's going to happen, and I'm not going to lie to you and say it's going to be tomorrow, it's going to be next week. I don't know. I do not know. But I can't see how this goes on forever. It just can't. It's got to the point now where it's affecting the lives of not just ordinary Russians, but the Russian elites, and they're not happy about it. And Putin only stays in power by this Faustian bargain that he has struck with the Russian elites to, allow them to be as corrupt as fuck and kill as many people as they like, so long as they pay tribute to Caesar and they give him money. They give him money. He just wants some money. Give me money. Give me all your money. The possible actors in this would be, would be the elites, would be the people around the FSB factions, the military leadership, the oligarch networks around Putin. This isn't going to be like masses storming the Kremlin. It's not going to go down that way, I don't think. Russia is too heavily repressed for that to actually take hold. There's no way that I think a group could really organize themselves in a way that could possibly set up an operation on such a scale. I think it's just going to be the internal security elite that decide that Putin has become a liability they want to get out of this war. And this is why it's so telling that they're saying his war, because the war ends with Putin. The war ends with Putin. So they get rid of Putin, no more war. And then they can turn around to the rest of the world and say, sorry about that. That was all Putin. That was all Putin. That was Putin doing that. Naughty, naughty Putin. And this could happen in a way that isn't particularly shock and awe. They'll talk about a temporary transfer of authority. He's been in charge for a long time. He's been in charge for 26 years. He needs a break. He's just got to go on holiday. They might talk about health reasons. He's stepping aside. They'll talk about stepping aside, and they'll control the transition narratives. But it's important to remember that the coup plotters, whoever they are, they're very unlikely to be democratic. They just want stability. They want sanctions relief. They want preservation of elite wealth. So what you could end up with is something along the lines of Putinism without Putin, right? Which is shit for the people in Russia. But for the people in Ukraine, that's one of the best possible outcomes, because they can then, there's no reason to keep the war going. There's no reason to keep the war going, because stability in Russia does not equal war with Ukraine. You can have one or the other. You can have war with Ukraine, or you can have stability. And obviously, whoever takes over from Putin will do this. But there's also another scenario, which I think is a little less likely because of the way Putin's psychology, but it could happen, which is a managed succession. Stay with me on this. The Putin might attempt to control succession before total collapse. If he's smart and he plays this smartly, he could install someone like he did in 2008, where he put Dmitry Medvedev in as president, and Putin became prime minister for 4 years, and until 2012, and in that process he changed the constitution and made it so he could come back as president again. But everyone knew that Putin was really in charge. But if you think about it, if he wants to preserve the system, protect family and loyalists, negotiate immunity, avoid chaos, but still kind of keep some reins of control, it would make sense for Putin to put in a patsy as president and step aside, but still control things from the background and allow that patsy, allow whoever's, his mouthpiece, to then bring all the troops back and say, well, that was Putin. And Putin just makes no public appearances, but he keeps his wealth. He keeps his, people are talking about Elon Musk being the world's first trillionaire. Piss off. Do you know the first world's trillionaire was Putin years ago? He's fucking so rich. It's painful. Tractor porn, says Kitty. Yeah, absolutely. Dip me in chocolate and throw me to the tractor porn. Anyway, so yeah, you've got the succession. So that's a possibility, but succession in personalist dictatorships are incredibly difficult. You saw this with Mugabe in Zimbabwe. He was like 92 years old, refusing to step down, and he needed all these guarantees, and he wouldn't step out the way. When a whole system revolves around one man, nobody fully trusts anybody else, and then you've got the problem with the successor. If they're too reformist, that'll make the hardliners angry. If they're too hardline, the economy is going to worsen. They're too weak, then there'll be systemic fractures that will end up collapsing the Russian regime as it stands, the Putinist regime, if you like. And you could look at the late Soviet leadership crises, actually, there's more than one. You could look at the Francoist Spanish transition. You could look at authoritarian systems trying to control reform after the fall of a strongman dictator. It usually goes the way of whoever gets, handed the shit sandwich, which is, you're in charge now. What was the name of the Nazi who took over from Hitler? Was it Donitz or something? Was it Admiral Donitz or something? He took over, and his only job was to sign the surrender documents. That was his job. And I was like, right, that's it. You're sacked. You're fired. Thank you for your signature. But yeah, and then there's another scenario, which is least likely, I will say, but not impossible long term, which is systemic collapse. The combination of economic collapse, military humiliation, elite fragmentation, and infighting where the elites all try and take each other out. Will end up being like a fistful of dollars, So I walked into town and sets off all the rival cartels and gangs and gangsters that run Russia against each other. Public unrest as well. And Russia is enormous and internally fragile. And so what you might start seeing is ethnic tensions growing, regional inequalities being brought to the fore, and dependency on central authority being challenged. And you will see parts of Russia, I think, like Dagestan, like Chechnya, like South Ossetia, Abkhazia, Crimea, saying we don't want to be under Russian rule anymore. This is shit. This is shit. We're anything but this. Anything but this. And there is a nightmare scenario kind of thing. Do we really want chaotic fragmentation in a nuclear-armed state? Not particularly. But then, are their nukes working? If they were, why haven't they tested any? If they were, why haven't they used any? Don't poke the Russian bear. Yeah, okay. I've seen their tanks. They don't look after things. Do you think they look after their nuclear weapons? I don't think so. But a collapsing Russia would be arguably more dangerous than what we've got at the moment. So that's something to bear in mind before you start going, whoa, take that, Russia. You deserve it after all the shit you've done. What happens if Putin does go, right? And one way or another, collapse or coup, or he steps aside. What happens? Does the war end automatically? Well, not necessarily. There's a possibility that the successor will, to lead Russia, will want to end the war immediately, seeks a ceasefire quickly. They need sanctions relief. They want stabilization. But then there's also the possibility that nationalist hardliners may intensify the war temporarily, using the stab in the back mythology rather than, blame the weakness caused by Putin. Maybe they'll put all the blame on him rather than the invasion and military weakness itself. That could be interesting. There's also the possibility of a frozen conflict resulting in a Korean War style stalemate. Don't forget, the Korean War's not over, friends. People say, oh, the TV show MASH lasted longer than the Korean War. No, it didn't. The Korean War's still going on. The Korean War has never stopped. There's never been a peace treaty. There's a ceasefire. That's different. And that's why you've got the peace line, the DMZ as they call it, with the little huts that straddle it between North Korea and South Korea. And, there's no formal peace between South Korea and North Korea. And you could have the same situation in Ukraine. And the problem here, other than Ukraine losing 1/5 of its land, is that Kyiv is very unlikely to trust Russian guarantees that it won't start an offensive anytime soon. And any settlement would require serious security guarantees, i.e., if Russia decides that they want to invade, make the Cold War go hot again, make the stalemate end up, want to attack Ukraine again, then there are guarantees from European rulers, European leaders, to say we will bomb the living shit out of you. That is that is a pretext to fucking war, But also, there's a kind of interesting geopolitical twist here that even Xi Jinping in China, it reportedly appears skeptical of Putin's judgments in this. And whereas we talk about China being empowered by Donald Trump, right? Because he's like, oh well, Trump doesn't care about what happens to Taiwan, famously, right? So he's like, oh, I don't care what happens to Taiwan, so whatever. And Xi is seeing that like, oh well, that's an excuse to invade Taiwan, but in the same way that Brexit showed all the other countries around Europe that were thinking of seceding from the European Union, right? That was a really bad idea, and it would end up costing your country an absolute bloody fortune and knocking your economy off course. And the analogy that was told to me when I was in the WTO in Switzerland, they said it's a bit like you're on a motorway and all the cars are driving at 70 miles an hour, and some are going a bit faster, some are going a bit slower, and that's your economy. And then suddenly, for no reason whatsoever, we slam our car into first gear. And you know what's going to happen. Maybe the engine will blow up, but certainly you'll be left behind. You have to sort it out, whatever, And then even when you start going at the same speed as the other cars, you're never going to catch them because they've gone ahead. So that was the way it was explained to me. So in the same way, that other countries around Europe have looked at Britain leaving the EU and going, that's something that we don't want to do. The same thing has happened with this invasion of Ukraine by Russia. Because she's looking at this going, if I try and get into Taiwan, I'm going to be bogged down with the same thing, unless I want to be Lord of the Ashes. And here's the thing, when you talk about Taiwan and the fact that China is a nuclear armed power, so yeah, obviously it could reduce the whole of Taipei to rubble. But here's the thing: Xi Jinping cares a lot about the history of China, and Chinese people care a lot about the history of China. And there's a fuckload of history of China in Taiwan, because the Kuomintang government that ran away when it got beaten by the communists, by Mao Zedong in the 1940s, they legged it to Taiwan with all the stuff. They took all the treasure. They took all the family heirlooms of the years. And you know what? I'm going to say this, right? Because look, Taiwan was a terrible dictatorship until relatively recently, until like the 1980s, right? It wasn't a great place to live, right? But they didn't destroy their own heritage. Whereas the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s in China, they burnt a lot of their own heritage because they decided that all this, they decided to announce things were decadent and Western, and they were just burning musical instruments and burning, documents and beautiful calligraphy because it mentioned people from other countries, and it was a horrible time. It was a horrible time, and at least those heirlooms from the old dynasties were kept, safe in Taiwan. And it's not to excuse what happened in that war and what happened with the Taiwanese government being really tyrannical until the 1980s, which they were. But then the government of China was bloody tyrannical, still is. But yeah, so Xi Jinping is looking now over at what's happening in Ukraine, and it's like a bit of a warning, isn't it? Well, you try and go into Taiwan, this may happen to you. And look, China does not want Russia to collapse. It doesn't want global instability because it's not good for trade. It doesn't want nuclear chaos. But it is happy to see Russia weakened. Very interesting that Vladimir Putin's been to China now 25 times in the last 26 years, whereas America's been, twice in the last 10 years? Well, the American president's been twice in the last 10 years because America is less dependent on China. It's not to do with the fact that, Vladimir Putin loves China and he wants to be there all the time, with his busy mate, looks like Winnie the Pooh. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is the Chinese are like, hey, do you want something? Come over here and ask for it then. And Putin is increasingly resembling the junior partner in the partnership between China and Russia. And some in Moscow expected Trump to pressure Ukraine into concessions, but that optimism is reportedly fading because the Ukrainians have just gone, we don't need you. We don't need you. Trump thought he had a Trump card. He didn't. He doesn't hold any cards, just like in Iran. He's just shit at this. He doesn't have the people around him to advise him correctly on what he needs to do. And then, meanwhile, Ukraine just adapted, increased its domestic weapons production. It's gone for deeper EU integration, where we're seeing it could become a satellite member as soon as next year. And then, stronger European security ties, stronger bonds with the rest of Europe. And I would say before I wrap up that this is possibly one of the most dangerous moments for Ukraine and for Russia and possibly the world, because dictators are often the most dangerous when they are weakened. Putin today appears isolated, paranoid, angry, increasingly detached from reality, but he's still capable of immense destruction. And Ukrainians are continuing to pay the price daily on that. And, the central contradiction here is that Putin launched this war to restore Russian greatness, right? Instead, he may have permanently damaged Russia's economy, its military prestige, its democratic future, its global standing, its internal stability. And I don't see that this is just a temporary bit of turbulence for Putin and the Russian regime. I believe that this is the beginning maybe of the end of Putin's Russia, and maybe even Russia as we know it. It could happen. So yeah, reasons to be cheerful. Could Russia have made a good economy if it didn't put oligarchs in charge and become a kleptocracy? Yeah, Shinzed, absolutely. They got the resources. They got resources up the kazoo. They could have definitely become like and also become a really cool place to go and visit. They could have some really lovely Red Sea resorts. They could have, obviously the skiing there. They could be doing this, Um, Chris has got breaking news for us. Netanyahu is reportedly furious that Israel wasn't involved in the latest peace talks with Iran. He's to hold an emergency security meeting later today to discuss next steps. Chinese history is fascinating, particularly the Three Kingdoms period. It's like Game of Thrones, but better, says Tommy. Yeah, Tommy Lee, whatever fiction can conjure up, reality is always like, what happened? What? You can't do that. No, they just did. I feel like China was going to invade Taiwan. They would have done so already. It's going to be very difficult for them if they do. I mean, you can say what you like about the current regime in China and Xi Jinping, but they're not idiots. They're not idiots. Putin's not an idiot either. He's just been blinded by ambition. And in a way, if you want to get into it, like, why did he invade Ukraine at that point? Well, I think that he could feel his authority waning. He had won a great victory for the Russian people in terms of the Brexit that they helped foist upon us in Britain, and getting Trump elected in America. And then by 2022, Brexit had clearly failed. The dominoes had not fallen across Europe, even though the UK said, "I'm leaving. Who's following me?" And like no one else came with them. They had to pick up the goldfish in the goldfish bowl and walk out on their own. In America, like they had another president. Trump didn't win his second term, and it was. I think that it was the actions of a weak leader who declared this war. Well, declared a special military operation on Ukraine, because he worried about the waning influence of Russia. And don't forget, there is also a point here that I'd like to make about Crimea. The reason why they invaded Crimea in 2014 was because of the Sebastopol base. So there was a revolution, peaceful revolution in Ukraine in 2014, where the Russian backed puppet leader, the president of Ukraine, was ousted, and they got another president who was put in. It wasn't Zelensky, by the way, it's the guy before Zelensky. And in response to that, they thought that they wouldn't be able to continue to use the base in Sebastopol when the lease ran out in a few years' time, because they were leasing that base. It was Russia's most important military base, naval base, and well, no, second actually after Kaliningrad, but you get what I mean. Yeah, this is a fascinating way of seeing what's going on here. Like he said, like, we've got to keep this base. You got to keep this base. So he invaded and took over in 2014 and took part of the Donbass region, claiming that people spoke Russian there, so he needs to look after them. But the full scale invasion was basically because I think he was like, shit, Brexit didn't make the European Union fall apart, and Trump is no longer leader in America, and I'm out of ideas. And a war is a great way of getting people on board. If you win it. And now Russia's been involved in this war in Ukraine longer than it was involved in World War One and longer than it was involved in World War Two. You said the other day you're going to pull up this summary of the full damage the ECHR guidance is going to do. Is it up anywhere? I'm going to refer to it in my MP email, Gallifreyan, and I'll get going on that immediately. Thank you for reminding me. So it's these are notes that have been given by Rachel. But I'll put that up as a post now to you for you. But it goes through each individual scenario and what the ruling is, which is absolutely bloody ridiculous. I mean, the whole thing is just so unworkable. It's frustrating that I just don't think the people who have come up with this shit just live in the real world. I really don't think they do. So yeah, let's. So this is going to be a post on Hughes of the World. Fuck. Sorry, one sec. I've got to. I can't just copy and paste. Copy image. Come on. Do you know what the posting thing on YouTube is so bad? Like, it's like trying to post stuff on Facebook 10 years ago. Like, it's like, why can't I copy and paste a picture in? No, I've got to save image as, and then I got to press save, and then I got to go over to here, and I got to press image. And also it crops the image one by one, and it's like, why would you do that? Why would you crop that? I don't want it cropped. It's just what it does. So yeah. Okay, right. Now this is being even more annoying because it's not showing me. What is it? Is it? What is going on here? Sorry, one sec. That's the one. That's the one that I want. Okay, there you go. Okay. Just one sec. Sorry. I'm trying to swipe something, but things are moving. It's all right. Do you know what? But some of the things that YouTube has set up are really, really good, and some of them are really shit. There you go. Hey. Okay. Okay. Okay, so there you go. That's now added as a post on this. Confetti time for Diz. Oh, okay, Viper Scott, if you demand it, I will comply. Confetti time. Woo! L is going on. New research revealed that 110 meter hurdle runners who have a fear of hurdles eventually get over it. Oh, very good. Very good. Hiddenite. Hey, don't forget, Brexit was part of an Epstein plan. He was so excited when Brexit happened. He emailed, "This is the start of tribalism. Brexit was made by a paedophile." Yeah. Well, it was a group of international wrong-uns. It wasn't just him. But yeah, you're right. You're right. Really, really fucking grim. Really fucking grim. Anyway, so I'm gonna head off, I think. Get prepped for tonight's show. We're going to be doing the Sunday night social, which will be run from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock tonight. Should be fun. Talking of timings, like, honestly, I was set up and ready and sat here at 10 o'clock this morning, and I was about to press go, and then I looked at the clock and went, "Oh, it says 10 o'clock. What? Hang on. Thought it was 11. Just woke up and thought it was 11. I don't know why. What's the difference between a racist Nigel Farage and a bucket of shit? You can take the shit out the bucket, and then you've got a bucket, and that's kind of useful. Whereas Farage is just a piece of shit. That's not useful in any way, shape, or form. He's shit on your shoe, you shitty shoe bastard. Chris C says, Kate, quite possibly Netanyahu needs to be reined in, but the Christian nationalists don't want that, as they believe the rapture starts in Israel. Wasn't there a Blondie song called Rapture? Before we go, I'm gonna read something out to you. We have this is quite an admission by omission. So this is Zeit Online, a German publication. It's a conversation, right? An interview. Farage says, "We have no links to Russia." And Zeit Online said, "You didn't meet with the Russian embassy's deputy chief of mission in London." Farage says, "Nope." And Zeit Online says, "Not in 2013, before the Brexit campaign was conceived." Farage says, hang on, he came to the EP office, or I met with him in London, so what? And Zeit Online says, "Why did you meet with him?" To which Farage replied, "I think you are a nutcase. You really are a nutcase. Brexit is the best thing to happen for Russia, for America, for Germany, and for democracy." That's the key point. Did anyone notice what was missing there? Let me read out the words of Nigel Farage. Not my words, Lynn, the words of Nigel Farage. Brexit is the best thing to happen for Russia, for America, for Germany, and for democracy. Anyone? 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 Read that out to people who are thinking of voting for these rats. He's just in it to feather his own nest and to destroy this country. That's all he's interested in. Cheers, Graham, for the stream today. You're welcome. You won't be saying that on Wednesday. You'll be like, "Graham, will you shut up?" Who can talk for 48 hours? almost straight. But we will see. We will see. UK. Yeah. He didn't mention the UK. Best thing to happen for Russia, for America, for Germany. For Germany. Yeah, because it helped out their economy because they got to steal all of our juicy contracts within the EU. Farage is now claiming his phone was hacked by the Russians. Yeah. Do you remember a few years ago when he had a loose tire and he had to change his tire and he said that it was sabotage? Yeah. It was the Russians. The Russians tried to get me. But there you go. Absolutely insane, isn't it? Just absolutely insane. So there you go. For England, James, absolutely. No, for Farage. For Farage, always for Farage. The For Farage party. When he's gone, there will be no more refuck. It will just disappear up its own arsehole. Bring on that day. Bring on that day. Okay, I'm going to head off now. Yes, thank you very much for the reminder. Andrew Ray, click the like button. We always like a like on this channel. Subscribe and hit the bell notification icon if you're not already subscribed or you're not already notified. And like I say, got to prep today for the big show that starts tomorrow. We're not going to have morning brew. We're not going to have the usual agenda, unfortunately. We're not going to be doing stateside. We're not going to be doing Geoscope. We're going to be going straight through till Wednesday morning, hopefully, with me sitting here talking about shit. I mean, 15 minutes a country, I can do that. Just whether I can stay up awake enough. So there's going to be lots of coffee. I'm going to bring down my teas made down here so you can enjoy my teas made with me. So I can make myself hot drinks while I go. I'm going to have a little carton of milk. Yeah, we went up from 18 degrees to 19 degrees now here in Durham. So, you know, it's getting hot in here, so take off all your clothes. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for sticking with the channel. Hopefully we should have an influx of some new visitors tomorrow when I do my world record attempt, and obviously the Guinness World Record podcast that I did is going to go out on their site. I don't know what time it gets released, but yes, I will certainly let you know when that happens. And yeah, until tonight, hopefully you'll meet us at 8 o'clock for the Friday night social with me and Mike Dix and friends. And until then, I'll say thank you so much for watching. Hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.